Shit. All right, here we go. So first thing we're going to start with, we're going to cover two concepts today, but let's talk a little bit about what you're going to learn in this unit, in this 4-day unit. All right, so you're going to learn where populations tend to be located in the world, places in the world where populations are increasing, and then also populations in the world where populations are decreasing, are changing in a negative fashion. We're going to learn about what makes that change. We're going to talk about a demographic model that can be used. And we'll also talk about the roles of women, how the roles of women impact populations, and what are some consequences when what are some negatives of massive population increase, and then what the government does in response to populations rising or falling. All right. So this is a cool video I always show, and let me pull this up right now. Okay, so this is a 5.5-minute video. But what this does is this shows population growth over human history. Okay, so I'm going to play this right now. Again, there's a link right in the slides, so you're welcome to watch on your own. But kids kind of get a kick out of this. Stick with it. It gets a little more interesting towards the end of the video. Does anybody know what CE stands for when it says 1 CE? Anybody want to take a guess? 1 CE.
1 century?
No, it's common era. Common era. So what it means is these in historians and geographers used to say AD, after death. And it was based off of Christianity, off of Jesus Christ. But now they change that around to try and take religion out of the picture, and they use common era. So it's technically after the death of Jesus Christ, and once Jesus Christ passed away, it was considered what was known as the common era. So this is showing populations rising at the beginning of what's known as the common era. So if you see BCE, that's before common era. There we go. So you're going to see some timelines, a timeline at the bottom, and then an important fact about what's going on during that timeline. So 55 years into the Common Era, this is where people were located throughout the world, mainly East and Southern Asia, small parts of Africa, Europe, and small parts of the Americas. And during this time, the major movement was the Han Dynasty, which is a major empire in China. And so you're going to hear a heartbeat. And as these populations grow, you're going to hear that heartbeat pick up. So this is important right here. We're stopping at the year 1000, so approximately 1020 years ago. The trans-Saharan trade was really important because up to this point, people were mainly living in areas where their ancestors were from and had originated from hundreds of years ago. The vast majority of the world's population was concentrated in Asia and parts of Europe. And people, it hadn't dawned on them that there was another world full of exploration that they could travel to. And at the time, they didn't have the technology for it. So now you're going to see as technology really increases over the last 1,000 years here, populations really begin to boom because of transportation and science and medicine. Okay, so we're going to hit the Black Death right here in the year right around 13 to 1400. So the Black Death was a massive worldwide pandemic that really hit Europe really hard, came from parts of Asia and Southwest Asia, and really wiped out populations in Europe. So what I'd like you guys to focus on for the next 100 years of this video is watch these dots in Europe. And remember that each dot represents 1 million people. So watch the dots there. So coming up over the next 100 years, you're going to hit the Industrial Revolution, and this is when you're really going to see populations really begin to explode. It's like a bunch of flickering lights. You're already seeing that, and you're going to hear the heartbeat pick up. So the Earth's populations hit 1 million, or 1 billion, I'm sorry. Okay, so I show that video as a bell ringer in my geography and AP Human Geography classes because it gives kids a good perspective on how populations have grown over time, and it gives them the impression like, whoa, yeah, I didn't realize how quickly the Earth's population has increased over the last 100 to 200 years. You know, in the year 1800 or so, our population was about 1 billion people, and now it's over 7 billion people. And it's projected, like the video says, to hit 10 billion by the end of the 21st century, which is a staggering number. And so what we're going to talk about, and hopefully what you start thinking about now, is how have populations been able to just rapidly increase over the last couple hundred years, and then what governments do about that. What are the roles of men and women in that? And what are some consequences on resources? What have we done as a society to keep feeding those new people? Okay, so does anybody have any questions so far? All right. All right, so topic 3.1 deals with population dynamics. And so the first thing you need to understand are some technical terms. So 3.1 deals with more of like the variables, what causes populations to rise and fall. So a couple things you need to know right off the bat. A couple of the main indicators are crude birth rate, which is labeled CBR, and crude death rate, which is labeled CDR. So crude birth rate is how many babies are born out of 1,000 people. So if, say, the town of Woodstock had a CBR of 5, that means for every 1,000 people living in Woodstock, 5 babies are born every year. Okay, which is a pretty low number. You know, Woodstock's got what, about 25,000 people. You do the math, that's a pretty low amount of babies being born. But just to give you an idea, so if you see a number that says like 10, 20, that's 20 babies for every 1,000 people being born. Okay, where are you going? Oh boy. All right, have fun. The death rate, grim one. Death rate, mortality. Okay, death rate has to do with deaths. Okay, these are pretty easy to understand. And if you have a death rate of, say, 10, that means there's, for every 1,000 people living in your town, you have a death rate of 10 people per 1,000 dying. Okay, now obviously that death rate has gone up recently because of COVID-19. And what we're going to look at here is a nice little indicator. This is showing how many women are having children in the United States from 1960 to 2017. So looking at this graph, what has happened to the amount of babies being born in the United States over the last 50 years or so, 60 years? What's happened to the amount of babies being born in the United States over the last 60 years? Anybody want to?
A lot.
What's that? What happened a lot?
There weren't as many babies born.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a staggering amount. Look at this. The average woman was having almost 4 children in 1960, and then all of a sudden it begins to really fall, and it just flatlines during the 1970s, picks up a little bit in the 1980s, but it's nowhere near. Right now, the average woman has about 1 to 2 children in her lifetime. The average woman. 60 years ago, she was having almost 4 children in her lifetime. So that's another component we're going to talk about, is why do birth rates fall? And looking at this, I don't know, maybe you knew this, maybe you didn't. The United States birth rate, along with that of a lot of European countries, has really flatlined, meaning fallen dramatically. So we're going to talk about that. All right. Fertility is how many people are being born in a country. So being born, pretty easy to understand. Mortality, which you've heard of probably a lot recently with COVID-19, is how many people are dying. So like when they talk about the mortality rate of COVID-19, if you ever hear that term, what's the mortality rate of COVID-19? That means what's the percentage of people dying from it? So right now, I think they don't have definitive studies yet, but they're thinking the mortality rate for COVID is around 1 to 2.5%, meaning if you get it, if you contract it, you have like a 1 to 2.5% chance of away from it. Okay. Another factor you have to consider here is migration. Remember, migration is people coming into or leaving the country. So we're going to talk about that in more detail next week, immigration versus emigration. But I bring that up now because, well, if you're the United States, and the United States, very few babies being born, but you have a ton of people entering the country, then it kind of offsets it, because now you might not have as many kids being born, but at the same time, you got a bunch of people moving in. Your population's still going to stay high. But if you're a European country where you don't have a lot of kids being born, and at the same time, coming into your country and people are leaving, that's a problem. We'll talk about why that is. Okay? So up to this point, you should know crude birth rate, you should know crude death rate, and you should know these terms: fertility, mortality, and migration. Any questions so far? All right. Moving right along. All right, so this is an important, you don't learn a lot of formulas in human geography to start out with, but this is an important one, or an equation, whatever you want to call it. Doubling time. In that video, the video got to about 1800, and all of a sudden the world's population went from 1 billion people, I think in like 1820, to 2 billion people like 30 years later. That means it doubled. It doubled from 1 billion to 2 billion. Okay. Doubling time is important because if you were a country, you want to know how quickly your population is either going to double in size or halve in size. Okay. So what you want to use is you use something called the natural increase rate. The natural increase rate is the percentage of growth in population in your country. So if you have a natural increase rate of 1%, that means that your population is growing by 1% each year. Okay? So that's the first step. You got to know what natural increase rate is. It's the percentage of growth. How you get that? You take your crude birth rate, subtract the deaths out of it, crude death rate, and you have a natural increase rate. Okay? So right now, I think the average in the world is right around like 2%, I want to say. Some countries are far higher than that. Some countries are far lower than that. And so if you wanted to figure out how quickly it would take for your country's population to double in size, you use what's known as the rule of 70. Now, you can use this same rule, the rule of 70, in finance. If you were to invest $100 into an account and they told you that, okay, that $100 is going to grow by 2% every year, what you could do is you use the rule of 70 to determine how quickly that money is going to double. So 70 divided by 2 is 35. So 35 times 100 would be 3,500. Okay. So your money is going to grow. It's going to take you 35 years for that money to double in size. All right. So I give you an example here. If the United States has a natural increase rate of 4%, it doesn't. You would do 70 divided by 4, your natural increase rate, and that would be 17 and a half. So it's going to take the United States 17 and a half years for its population to double in size. So if you have a piece of scrap paper laying around, we're going to do some practice in a second. You can jot down this right here, 70 divided by the NIR, because we're going to do a little practice in this. Okay, 70 divided by the NIR. Okay. Let's do that right now since we're on that, and we'll come back to the world regions practice. All right, so I pulled up the true actual rate of increase in population for these countries. I researched this a couple days ago and pulled it up. So the numbers are in percentages. So Angola, which is a country in Africa, has a natural increase rate of 33%. Niger, another country, has an increase rate of 38%. Pakistan in Southwest Asia, or South Asia, has 21% natural increase rate. The United States has a 3% increase rate. Netherlands, 1.35, and Italy, -3. So I'm going to have you guys figure out the natural increase rates for these 6 countries, and then I'm going to call on 6 people. I'm not going to tell you who you are because I want everybody to do the work, but be prepared. So again, natural increase rate is listed right here. I want you to find the doubling time. So to find the doubling time, it's 70 divided by whatever the natural increase rate is. Okay? Does anybody have any questions? All right. Hop to it. You got, I'll give you a couple minutes. Give you 3 minutes. And then I'll call on a few people. And if you got questions, just ask. Again, 70 divided by your natural increase rate. time. You got a minute and a half left. So if you have questions, need help, just ask. "45 seconds left. "30 seconds left. "10 seconds. All right, time. So here I'm going to give people some assignments here. Let's see. Emmerich, you're going to take Italy in a second. Let's see. Addison, you're going to have the Netherlands. Georgia, you'll have Angola. Cameron, you'll have Pakistan. And Fernando, you'll have the United States. So Fernando, United States. Addison, Netherlands. Emmerich, Italy. Georgia, Angola. Cameron, Pakistan. And Ellen, Niger. Okay? So, Georgia, let's start with you. We're going to start from the top. Georgia, what do you got for Angola?
Are we looking? We're looking for the doubling time or the percentage growth?
Doubling time.
I had 2.12.
Yes. So what does the 2.12 mean? That's correct.
It's 2 years.
Yes.
Okay.
So in 2 years, your population is going to double to what? What's 33 times 2?
66.
There you go. Very good. See?
Okay.
So it's important, guys, like when we do a lot of like math and equations with my economics students, and they get these numbers and sometimes they feel like, oh, we're done. We got the numbers. It's important you understand what the number means and how to apply the number. So you were exactly right. This means if you took 70 divided by 33, you would get 2.12. But don't stop there. Oh, okay, I'm done. 2.12 is the answer. What does that mean? That means that in 2 years, Angola's population is going to double in size. It's going to go from 33 million people to 66 million people. That's an astounding increase in a very short amount of time. Okay? All right, Ellen, you have Niger. So, Ellen, tell us what you got for Niger.
I got 1.84.
Very good. So, what does that mean, Ellen?
Just under 2 years when the population will go from 24 to 48 million.
Very good. Very good. In a little under 2 years, Niger's population is going to go to about 48 million people. Again, a very big increase. All right. Pakistan. I think, Cameron, you had Pakistan. What did you get for the doubling time?
I got 3.3 years.
Very good. So tell us what that means, Cameron.
In a little over 3 years, the population is going to double.
Very good. From 220 million people to 440 million people. So especially for Pakistan, it's not a very big country and it's really mountainous too. You know, people don't like to live in the mountains. So that means that the government there is really going to have some questions to ask over the next 3 years about where do you put all these people? Your population is going to double. Like, imagine if that were Woodstock. You know, Woodstock's population is probably, give or take, 25,000 people right now. Imagine, like, in 3 years, somebody told you Woodstock's population is going to go to 50,000, like, become the size of a big Crystal Lake. Where are you going to put all these people? You got to find homes for them. You got to update your roads, your businesses. A lot of questions you got to ask. All right, very good, Cam. The United States, Fernando, what'd you get for the United States? Fernando, you there?
Yeah.
What'd you get for the United States?
I don't know. I was in the bathroom when you explained it. I was really hoping you wouldn't call me.
Okay, so here's what I want you to do. I'll come back to you in a second.
Okay.
You got a calculator on your phone?
Yeah, I got it right next to me.
Okay, so I want you to take 70 divided by 3 and tell me what you get.
70 divided by 3. 23.3.
Very good. So 23.3. So if Fernando had stepped away for a second, can anybody tell Fernando what that 23 means?
It's how long it will take for the United States population to double.
Yeah, very good. So it's going to take the United States about 24 years or so, 23 years, to go from 330 million people to 660 million people. So it's going to take a longer time than that of the other 3 countries we talked about so far. All right, good job. The Netherlands. Addison, what'd you get for the Netherlands?
I got 51.85 years. So it's just
Yeah, very good.
It's just under 52 years.
Yeah, so it's going to take them even longer to double in size, go from 17 to 34.
Yeah.
All right, last one, Emmerich. I gave you the hardest one.
Okay, so I got that it's going to take 23.3 years for the population to go from 60 million to 30 million.
Excellent. Very good, because some kids, they might see the -3 and think, all right, well, toolbar is hiding it up there, but they see the -3 and they might think, oh, wait a minute. What does that mean, though? Do I still multiply by 3? Yes. Or you still divide by 3. You'd still do 70 divided by 3, which is 23.3. And what this means is because it's a negative number, that means that Italy's population is falling by 3% every year. Every year. So that means in 23 years, like he just said, their population is going to go to 30 million people. All right. So hopefully, guys, this gives you a good appreciation of the importance of doubling time and increase rate. Before we get into the major population clusters and wrap up the notes for today, here's your different world regions. Some of them are listed there. Some of them are listed by country. Of those, what regions of the world do you guys think is experiencing rapid population growth? And what regions of the world do you think is experiencing very low population growth? Anybody want to take this?
Are we talking about like currently or just in general?
No, currently. Like regions of the world today where populations are rapidly growing and regions of the world today where populations are falling or are stagnating.
I would say the most common places that would probably be decreasing would be either North America or possibly Europe.
Okay.
Increasing, I would say maybe, I'm not particularly sure, but I would have to say it has to be somewhere where COVID-19 isn't very aware because there isn't as much people, because there isn't much contact.
Okay.
So maybe around some parts, maybe in South America or maybe Australia.
Okay. Okay, so South America and Australia. Okay. Other ideas, places of the world where the population is growing or decreasing in size.
I know it's not going to be China because China has that one-child rule.
Okay.
Italy is decreasing, like we know that. Probably somewhere in Asia, like Russia.
Okay.
Or something.
Okay. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Antarctica is a very low populated area, so they're like, even if their population is increasing and decreasing, it's at a much smaller scale.
Okay.
With less people, so that could be for either, depending on how you look at it.
Okay. All right, very good. So keep all these things in mind. So I'm not going to give you the right or wrong answer at this point. Okay. So we're not necessarily going to get to it today, but Tuesday and Wednesday of this week, we're going to talk about why populations rise and fall. All right. And so in the last section of notes here for today, look at if you were a geographer trying to pinpoint the major areas of the world where a lot of people live, geographers come up with 4 clusters or 4 concentrations where you would find a ton of people, almost a quarter of the world's population. And so those 4 places we're going to look at are Europe, East Asia, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. Okay, and we're going to talk about some characteristics of them, and then we're going to wrap up with places people prefer to live and people would rather not live in. And you touched on one of them earlier with Antarctica. All right. So this is called a cartogram. So this is a map saying that if the land size of a country was based on its population, this is what it would look like. So if India's land size was based off of the amount of people, like as more people go into a country, its land size on the map grows in size, India would look like this. So a takeaway from this is the bigger the country on this map, the more people live there. So you'll see Nigeria in Africa is a big one. Brazil, relatively the same in size. Same with the United States and Mexico. Germany, a little bigger than its actual size. Russia, oh, I'm sorry, that's China right there. There's Russia. Jeez. There's China, a lot bigger than its actual size. India, Pakistan. So this is called a cartogram. Japan over here, bigger than its actual size. South Korea. So, all right. We'll talk about where these people are located in 4 clusters and then why they live there. So some characteristics about each of them. I'm not going to spend too much time on each. But if you talked about East Asia is one of the major Asian regions of the world. And East Asia encompasses mainly 3 countries, China, Japan, and South Korea. North Korea and Taiwan are also located. Here's North Korea right here. Here's Taiwan. Those are also located within the East Asian region, but the vast majority of the population growth comes from China, South Korea, and Japan. This is an area that is experiencing some good population growth. About a quarter of the world's population lives here, and people still mainly live in China on rural areas, okay, and in urban area and rural areas, while people in Japan and South Korea tend to live mainly in urban areas. They use public transportation quite a bit. Japan is an island, so they rely on a lot of outside resources to support their lifestyles, and it's very urbanized there. South Asia has about, if you wanted to figure out where 25% of the world's population is located, South Asia would include India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. We already talked about the Hindu-Islamic divide between these 2 countries, between India and Pakistan. We already used Pakistan's doubling time. I think their doubling time was 3 years. India is not too far behind that. Both countries are considered to be some of the up-and-coming population and economic powerhouses in the world. But at this time, they're very different from us, not only in the religion and language that they speak, but here in the United States, most people live in cities. They live in towns. Whereas in India and Pakistan, people are still very rural. You have to understand what rural is. Rural means farming, means living a country-style life away from the city, from big towns, okay? So India and Pakistan haven't gotten to that point yet where they're becoming more and more urbanized. And that's probably the next step for them. They do have some growing cities, but the majority of people still live in the country in South Asia. Europe's different. If you compared Europe to the other 2 regions, East Asia and South Asia, Europe is highly urbanized. And Europe, unlike the last 2, already had massive population growth. You know, they experienced their boom in the 1800s, the Industrial Revolution, before the World Wars. Today, the vast majority of these European countries have very little population growth. So if you wanted to like project this out, like if I was doing this slideshow, guys, 50 years from now, there's a very good chance that Europe is not going to be in the top 4 of population clusters. The reason they're there is because of the past demographic success. Women are no longer having very many children. Women are working more. It's not a very agricultural society, so you don't need as many kids on the farms. It's very urbanized, so there's less space. So people are having fewer babies. So that's Europe. Okay. And don't think that you got to remember all of these bullet points too. I just throw in like little tidbits if you want to learn something about the region. You know, I only have so much space, but I talk about maybe like resources or geography. So last one, Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia would be like Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. Southeast Asia has a lot of fragmented countries, meaning countries that are islands, which here's Indonesia right here. Over 600 million people in Southeast Asia live on these islands. They're mainly rural. They're mainly rely on agriculture or aquaculture, like fishing, for their lifestyle. But this is another area of the world that's booming in population size and is heavily Islamic. A lot of Islamic people live in Indonesia, while you have a lot of Buddhists that live in Laos and Cambodia and Malaysia and Vietnam. Okay. So what's a connection that you guys noticed between these 4 population clusters? What's a similarity?
They all have like a scale of either like the most populated areas in that specific country, or they have like a scale, like they have colors from like there's like red and different. Yeah.
Okay, good. What's another similarity that most of these share? If you had to make like a projection about where populations tend to be clustered today, what would you guys say? What part of the world would you find the vast majority of the world's people?
Like the East?
Okay, can you be more specific?
Like around Asia and places like that?
Very good. Look at this, Southeast Asia. Well, you got Europe, and I already mentioned how Europe will probably drop out of this list in the next 50 years. South Asia and East Asia. So if there's a takeaway from this today, guys, it's that you learned about the importance of Asia, the Asian continent, as a big source of population growth in the world. Look at this, a quarter of the world's population, East Asia, quarter, South Asia, 600 million people just on islands in Southeast Asia. So over half of the world's people, probably 60% of the world's people, live in Asia alone. And so over the next couple of days, we're going to talk about why Asia. You know, one of the students earlier mentioned China's one-child policy and how she thinks China really isn't growing in size. Actually, it still is. And we're going to talk about the one-child policy, what it was, its positives, its negatives, and did it really work? Okay. All right. So the last slide I have for you today. If I had to ask you guys, you know, what's your dream spot? Where would you want to live? Most of you guys are going to pick cities, warmer areas with like a moderate climate, you know, not too hot, not too cold, not too humid. You don't have a lot of invasive species or risks of disease. And so people tend to avoid the things I just mentioned. Real cold areas, extreme cold, extreme warmth, areas where you can't plant food. They're considered arid, A-R-I-D. Arid refers to like dry lands, and elevated areas because it's harder to breathe. It's harder to have a home up there. You're at higher risk of environmental catastrophe in these elevated mountainous areas. And so because of that, think about that. The world has a significant amount of dry lands, of areas that are really cold, like Antarctica, areas that are really wet, rainforests, waterways, highlands, mountainous areas where it's too difficult to live. And so because of that, the world's population can only concentrate in certain parts of the world, because those parts of the world is where it's nice to live, the climate's suitable, the soil is fertile and suitable for growing crops. You have waterways. Not every region and part of the world offers that amenity. So to help illustrate that, as we wrap up today, hopefully you can see this apple. If the world was an apple, right? And I wanted to cut the apple. Give me a second here. Hopefully I don't cut my leg off. Okay. Okay, we got 2 quarters, right? Here's 2 quarters here. Bear with me. There's a point to this. All right, so I cut it into quarters. 4 quarters, right? 3 quarters would be water. 3 quarters of the world, if the world were an apple, would be water. At this point in our lives, in our society, we're not really able to live on water. Sure, we could take a boat out, but nobody really wants to do that and live on the water for a sustained period of time. So these 3 are out. These 3 quarters are out. Okay? The other quarter of this apple, representing the earth, is soil. Okay? Land that we can actually set foot on, stand on, and live on. But this is where it gets tricky. If I took and peeled off the skin, I'm not doing a very good job. The skin of this apple. This represents the land on the earth that we can live on and grow crops on. This, out of the entire apple. Everybody see this? The skin of 1 quarter of the apple represents land that we can grow crops on. And so because of that, we're faced as humans, here's human environment interaction. We're faced with very difficult questions that we have to answer. What do we do with this land as our populations grow? How do we use this land and change this land so that it could continue to support populations? Our populations have grown from 1 billion people in 1820 to over 7 billion now, a 6 billion increase in about 200 years. But for some reason, we as a society have been able to support that using this fixed amount of land. So these are some questions that I hope pop into your head now, and think about as a geographer, and things that we're going to talk about over the next couple of days. So I hope that helped. So in conclusion, you should know what crude birth rate is, what crude death rate is, natural increase rate, and how to find doubling time, where people prefer to live, and your 4 major population clusters. So knowing that, I took a lot of your guys' time. That took a while.